She was not afraid of Rance. That was the first mistake she'd made in 3 years, and she made it every single morning. Vesper had spent a long time being afraid of things that were reasonable to be afraid of. A landlord's fist on a door, the hydro being cut in February, a supervisor who liked to rest a hand on her shoulder and call it mentorship. Gregor Rance wasn't any of those things. He was something she didn't have a word for yet, something that made fear seem quaint by comparison. She'd taken the job because she was 27 and owed $14,000 in student debt, and the offer was $280 a year with a private benefits package that didn't ask questions about pre-existing conditions. The work was bookkeeping and financial management for what was filed, on paper, as a private import and logistics consultancy with offices on Bay Street. What it actually was, she'd understood within the first month. She'd reconciled enough ghost accounts and blind trust disbursements to know exactly what kind of ledger she was managing. She had stayed because the alternative was going back to Sudbury, and she would rather be shot. 3 years later, she knew Rance's operation the way a surgeon knows an artery, not with affection, but with the kind of intimate, dangerous precision that goes wrong the moment your hand slips. She knew which shell accounts were about to attract attention. She knew which port contacts were skimming. She knew to the penny what it cost to keep a city councillor comfortable. Rance knew she knew. That was the agreement they'd never needed to sign. He ran everything from the 16th floor of a glass tower on Bay Street, behind a door of frosted glass and a receptionist who had never once offered anyone coffee. The outer office was clean, grey, deliberately neutral, the kind of interior that communicated nothing and cost a fortune to maintain. Vesper's desk sat between 2 large north-facing windows. On clear days you could see the lake. Most days in November you couldn't see anything past the dark grid of the city pressing up against the sky. She'd been at that desk for 11 hours on a Thursday and was pulling on her coat at 5:30 when his door opened. He didn't knock. He came out of his office the way a cold front moves through a gap in a building, not announced, just suddenly present. He was a large man, going silver at the temples, with a jaw that looked like it had been formed under considerable pressure. There was a scar along his left forearm that disappeared under his cuff, and his hands were the hands of someone who had not always worked behind frosted glass. He wore grey almost exclusively. He looked like money that had forgotten it used to be something else entirely. "The Bratislava accounts," he said without preamble. "Where are we?" "Reconciled and clean," Vesper said, buttoning her coat. "The variance from September was a wire delay. I've logged the correction." He looked at her coat, then at the clock above her desk. Vesper rarely left before 7. "I have somewhere to be," she said. She didn't elaborate. She had not made a habit of elaborating. Rance's expression didn't change. This was not unusual. His expression almost never changed. But something in the quality of his stillness shifted, the way a room shifts when someone has said something that hasn't fully landed yet. "I need the Laval portfolio summary before Friday morning," he said. "It'll be on your desk by 8 a.m. "Tonight." Vesper looked at him. She had a particular way of doing this. Level, unhurried, with the kind of patience that was really a very polished form of refusal. She'd developed it over years of dealing with men who confused volume with authority. "I have a personal appointment," she said. "The summary will be ready at 8. The numbers don't change overnight." A pause. In most offices, this would be where a reasonable person said, "Fine, have a good evening." In Rance's office, it was where the air thinned slightly. "A personal appointment," he repeated, as if the phrase were in a foreign language. "That's what I said." He looked at her for 3 more seconds. She counted, and then stepped back into his office without another word. The frosted door swung shut with a soft, definitive click. Vesper picked up her bag and walked out. She had met Liam at a professional development conference downtown 2 weeks earlier, not the kind she would normally have attended, but Rance had asked her to go because a contact of his was presenting on international logistics compliance, and she was supposed to listen for anything useful. She'd sat in the third row and taken notes, and the man in the seat beside her had leaned over and asked, in a low voice, whether the speaker was always this dry or whether today was special. She told him she didn't know. It was her first time. He'd said it was his third year coming, and he still couldn't work out why he kept coming back. She'd said maybe it was the free coffee. He'd said the coffee was genuinely terrible. They'd both laughed, and that had been that. Liam worked in the city's planning department. He had a calm, unhurried manner, the kind of person raised somewhere with long winters who had learned not to fight the pace of things. He was 31. He had no idea who Gregor Rance was. This was one of the most restful things about him. They were meeting at a wine bar on Ossington. She'd been once before and liked the brick-and-wood quiet of it, the fact that it wasn't trying to impress anyone. She arrived 15 minutes early. She ordered a glass of Gruner Veltliner and watched the street through the window. The November dark came in fast in Toronto, dropping the temperature inside an hour. People outside moved with their collars up, breath visible, everyone just trying to get somewhere warm. There was something she had always appreciated about this time of year. The city stripped of its summer performance, honest about what it actually was. Liam arrived exactly on time and apologized for it, as though punctuality in this city required an excuse. She told him it didn't. He sat down and they talked for 2 hours, and she ordered a second glass of wine, and at one point he made a small, dry observation about a zoning bylaw, and she laughed, actually laughed, not the short, controlled sound she used in the office to signal comprehension, and her hand moved across the table and touched his arm without her entirely deciding to do it. He smiled. His hand covered hers, briefly, naturally, the way a gesture does when no one is performing it for anyone. She didn't know that evening that one of Rance's people had recognized her through the bar window and sent a photograph. She didn't find out until 8 days later. The Monday after felt ordinary. She arrived at 8, made coffee. The machine was a Jura that had cost more than her first car, and she was the only person in the building who used it correctly, and set a cup on Rance's desk without being asked. She sat down and opened her files. Rance said nothing about the Thursday appointment. He came in at 9, reviewed the Laval summary without comment, approved a transfer. Vesper noticed he read the summary twice, which he didn't usually do. She noticed other things. He had shifted his chair slightly so he had a direct sight line to her desk. He stood at the window for longer than usual and at different times than usual. His attention moved across the room in a new pattern, and the pattern kept returning to the same point. She filed these observations in the part of her mind she used for things she didn't have time to address yet. By Wednesday, she had texted Liam twice and received 2 short, distracted replies. The second mentioned something about a job opportunity, unexpected, Halifax, a planning directorship on a major harbour development project. Incredible timing. He needed to think about it. She texted back that it sounded exciting. She put her phone face down on the desk and went back to the quarterly reconciliation. On Thursday, he called to say he was taking it. He was sorry. It had come out of nowhere. A recruiter had reached out on Tuesday morning, and the role was genuinely too good to turn down. It would advance his career by years. He hoped she understood. His voice was the voice of someone who already understood that she would. She said she understood. She sat at her desk and looked at the Jura machine and thought about nothing in particular. Then she started pulling the accounts. She was not certain what she was looking for when she started. She was good enough with numbers that looking was usually sufficient. The right figure in the wrong column. A payment that didn't match its stated purpose, a timestamp that arrived 2 hours before the event it was supposed to have followed. She moved through the general ledgers, the shell accounts, the disbursements filed under consulting and advisory fees. She found it on page 11 of an internal expense report. A referral fee, routed through a numbered company registered in Manitoba, paid to a recruiting firm she had never processed before. The date was the previous Tuesday. The notation read, Executive Placement, Municipal Planning Sector. Vesper looked at the figure for a long time. The flat November light came through the north windows. Somewhere below on King Street, a streetcar rang its bell. The ventilation system hummed its steady, uninflected note. She sat with the information for 4 full minutes. Then she printed the report, folded it once, and walked to the frosted glass door. She didn't knock. Rance was standing at the window when she came in, his back to her, looking out at the grey city. He turned when he heard the door. He looked at the paper in her hand, and something in his face, some very small, very carefully managed thing, shifted. "Vesper," he said. "Don't," she said. She crossed the room and placed the report on his desk and smoothed it flat with 2 careful fingers. She had circled the line item in red ink, the same way he circled her errors. He looked at the circled figure. He did not look away from it. "It's a recruitment placement," he said. "I know what it is," Vesper said. "I also know that the firm placed one candidate this week, an urban planner, Halifax. The offer went out Tuesday morning." She paused. 36 hours after one of your people photographed me through a bar window on Ossington." The silence in the room was the kind that has actual weight. "You moved him," she said, not raised her voice. There was no need. "You didn't destroy him, I'll grant you that much. You created a job offer he couldn't rationally refuse, and you put 6 figures behind it and you moved him to another province. Like a piece on a board." She looked at him steadily. "And you did it because you saw a photograph of me having a glass of wine with someone who has never done a single harmful thing to anyone in his life." Rance turned from the window. The calculated blankness she knew so well had cracked along an edge she hadn't seen before. He looked for a moment like a man who had been running a very long calculation and had just arrived at an answer he hadn't predicted. He wasn't the right. "Don't," she said again. Her voice was quiet and absolutely final. "You don't get to finish that sentence. You don't have the standing to finish that sentence." He moved toward his desk. He stopped before he reached her. He stood very still. "I didn't harm him," he said. "You made a decision about my personal life," Vesper said. "Without my knowledge, without my consent, using resources you built on a foundation I've been maintaining for 3 years. You reached into the only part of my existence that wasn't yours, and you rearranged it." She paused. "That's not a business decision. That's a man who has never once been told that something doesn't belong to him." His jaw tightened, the muscle at the corner of it moved once. "I need you here," he said. The words came out rough, stripped of their usual management. "You know that." "I know," she said, "and you used that. The fact that I know it, the fact that I stay anyway, as justification for this." She picked up the report. "You mistook my reliability for permission. Those are not the same thing." She put the report in her bag. "I'm resigning," she said. "Effective today. Handover documentation will be on your desk by 5. The Bratislava accounts are clean. Laval is closed. There are 3 outstanding variances in the March-April period that whoever takes this on will need to flag." She picked up her bag. "You owe me 2 weeks' notice pay and the December benefit premium. I've already calculated the amounts. I'll send an invoice." He said her name, just her name. She walked out. The firm on Adelaide was respectable, mid-sized, the kind of office where the most dangerous variable on any given day was a client who'd misread a tax schedule. They gave her a corner office and a reasonable salary and colleagues who said good morning like they meant it. She bought a proper thermos for the commute. She got home at a reasonable hour. She slept through the night. She was miserable. Not dramatically, not in any way she could have justified to anyone who asked. The work was fine, the office was fine, the people were perfectly decent. It was the transparency of it that undid her. The way every number was exactly what it appeared to be, every invoice legitimate, every morning predictable down to the minute. She had spent 3 years in a world where every column was a question that only she could answer, and now she sat in a world where the questions had all been answered before she arrived. She missed the Jura machine. She missed the particular quality of silence in the 16th floor when the city was still dark and the accounts were open and she was the only one in the building who knew what was actually in them. She missed the margins of the ledgers, covered in his handwriting, terse and difficult to read, always positioned to the left, as though he was writing towards something. She missed being the only person in that building who was not afraid of him. She told herself she did not miss him. She told herself this with some consistency and some care. On the 4th Tuesday of her new employment, a transfer arrived in her account. She looked at it twice. It was precise to the decimal. The notice pay, the benefit premium, and a figure she had never invoiced, never mentioned, never expected. 3 years of late evenings, 3 a.m. calls, Saturdays in the back office reconciling port accounts, while normal people went to their farmers' markets and their hockey games. All of it calculated at her standard hourly rate. All of it paid. She sat at her kitchen table in Parkdale and looked at her laptop screen for a long time. She called the number she had never deleted from her phone. He answered on the 3rd ring. He said nothing. He waited. "You paid the overtime," she said. "You earned it." A silence. The wind off the lake was audible, even from her 4th-floor apartment. She could hear, faintly, the sound of someone's television through the floor above. "Why now?" she said. Not a question exactly. "Because it was owed," he said. "That's how accounts settle. You know that better than anyone." She did know that. It was the most plainly honest thing anyone had said to her in a month. "You should have told me," Vesper said. She did not specify what she meant. He didn't need her to. "Yes," he said, "no qualification, no hedge, just the work." "It doesn't excuse it." "No," he agreed, "it doesn't." She closed her eyes. She had a very clear sense, sitting in her kitchen, of the exact shape of the choice in front of her. She could see its edges the way she saw the floor in a column of figures before she'd finished reading the row, not by looking for it, but because that was simply how her mind worked. She was built for this, for seeing the actual structure of a thing, stripped of what people needed it to look like. The structure of this was, she had left because she was right to. She could stay gone because she was right to, or she could go back, not because anything external had changed, not because she'd been outmaneuvered or frightened into it, but because she had sat in the clean, ordinary quiet of her new life for 4 weeks and learned something uncomfortable about herself. She was only half a person in it, the half that ran on low stakes and answered to no one and came home at 6 and slept without dreaming. That half was fine, functional, responsible. She was also the other half, the half that had walked into a Mafia syndicate's finances at 27 and not blinked, the half that had gone toe-to-toe with a man who had people removed from situations and had made him back down by looking at him steadily across a Persian rug. That half had been very quiet for 4 weeks. She did not confuse comfort with accuracy. She never had. "I'll come back," she said, "under 3 conditions." He said nothing. She took this as an invitation to continue. "Liam Forsyth gets a strong reference from your Halifax contact at the close of the project. You put him in that position, you can at least make sure there's a door on the other end of it." She paused. "Second, the next time you want to make a decision that touches any part of my life outside this office, you tell me directly, not your people, you, and then you actually listen to what I say back." She could hear him breathing. He was not a man who was usually audible. "The third," he said. "My contract gets renegotiated, full terms, not what you decided I was worth 3 years ago when I had a student loan and needed the job, what I'm actually worth now." A pause, "which is considerably more." The silence lasted long enough that she entertained the idea of hanging up. She was already reaching toward the thought of it when he said very quietly, "Name the number." She did. He didn't counter. She arrived Monday morning at 8. The Jura machine had been run on her settings all week by someone who had gotten the grind ratio consistently wrong. She corrected it without comment. She made 2 cups. She set one on his desk. He was already there, which was unusual. He looked up from the file he was reading. He looked at the coffee. He looked at her. She had expected some version of relief in his face, the release of a tension that had been held too long. What she saw instead was something more careful than that. He looked like a man who had reassessed a risk figure and was still checking the calculation. "The Bratislava accounts," he said. "Reconciled. I checked from home on Friday. There's a new variance in the Laval. I saw it this morning. Wire timing error. Correction is already logged." He nodded once. Something settled in the air of the office, the way a room settles when something that has been slightly off balance is righted. Vesper sat at her desk between the north windows and opened her laptop. Outside, the city moved through the grey morning. Below on King, a streetcar rang its bell. The lake was invisible under cloud, the way it often was this time of year. Present enormous, just not showing itself. After 20 minutes, Rance came out of his office. He didn't have a stated reason. He stood near her desk and looked out the north window at the indistinct sky. "Halifax confirmed the reference," he said. "Forsyth is flagged for a senior directorship when the project closes." Vesper kept her eyes on her screen. Good. He stayed by the window. Vesper. "I don't know how to." He stopped. He was not a man who stopped mid-sentence. He started again, more carefully. "I don't naturally know how to do this differently." She looked up at him. He was watching the window, not her. That was how she knew he meant it. "I know," she said. "That's why the second condition exists." She looked back at her screen. "We'll work on it." It was not a declaration. It was not a promise of anything uncomplicated. It was the kind of thing she'd say about a difficult reconciliation. Naming the problem clearly, acknowledging the work ahead, committing to it without pretending the work would be easy, or that the books would come out clean on the first pass. He received it as exactly that. He went back into his office. The frosted door swung shut with its familiar soft click. Vesper opened the Laval file and began correcting the wire timing entry, her handwriting, small, precise, resistant to easy reading, filling the margin of the ledger in blue ink. Outside the 16th floor windows, Toronto moved grey into afternoon, and the lake stayed hidden behind its own weather, and the city quietly calculated its own risk the way it always did, not loudly, not dramatically, but constantly in a language that most people didn't know how to read. Vesper read it perfectly. She always had, and that in the end was the only answer she'd ever needed to the question of why she stayed. Not because she was kept, not because she was afraid, but because she was the only person in that building, and possibly this city, who knew exactly what everything was truly worth, including herself. The question worth sitting with is this: did she walk back in with her eyes fully open, or did she just get very good at convincing herself she did? Drop your answer in the comments, because that line is thinner than any of us want to admit.